bridge has so many analogies to it, so many, there are so many connections between the concepts of bridges and bridging, that I write about. Like in the book, my new marketing book,
Oh,
Free Enterprise.
and God knows we need, businesses need the help right now more than
Yes,
ever.
everything's changed, but this does two things. It serves to help to promote world peace on a grassroots level by showing people in the most basic businesses how to develop their businesses and how to do most of that for free. How to set up a website, how to get on social media. No matter where you are in this world, if you have something that you're seeking to sell.
Right.
And through that trade, we make friends. And that's, we just crossed a bridge.
Right.
That's a bridge analogy.
Exactly.
And
there it is.
what I'm trying to do is build bridges to, for people to create more hope, more love within themselves, to stop being drawn into negative thinking
Right.
and cultism and concepts that we really don't believe in. And in fact, a lot of times, the leaders of some of the cult groups, it's important to mention, they don't believe what they're selling to their followers. But you know what? They make a lot of money by attracting some of these groups and by pandering to them. So it's very important. And the other thing all 7 of my books emphasize is for us to search into ourselves
Right.
and think for ourselves.
Right. Be a leader
Right.
and not a follower. In business, in your personal life, I mean, we tell our children, I know I emphasize that with my son, is, especially with the emergence and the awareness of bullying, in today's world, especially in schools, and cyberbullying, not only with our children, but, even with adults.
Well, this is the cruelty of gossip. And I can't tell you how many of my clients and friends talk to me about something adverse that somebody said about them or about whoever. And then all of a sudden, they start to have enemies they never knew. People who may have a false sense of superiority, that they're above everybody else. Because they're
Interesting.
bullies, or because, they've put somebody down from an unverified rumor. And we've had so much misinformation over the past several years that, we need to help people get more on a path of what's real and what's true.
Just like, believe it or not, I listen to, I do meditation, and I also listen to sleep story. When you mentioned we have to be real, it reminded me of that quote from The Velveteen Rabbit, which says, "Once you are real, you can never become unreal."
Right. The easiest thing to do is to hate and to hurt. The easiest thing to do is to pretend that you're above everybody else, your group is the way, or that another group doesn't have the right to exist, just because they do exist.
Right.
And that kind of social antagonism is what we're fighting now, and that's part of the basis of why I wrote that book, Speak Up.
Right. Great book, too. You might want
Thank
to,
you.
you all might want to check that book out, because that book is going to be soon in the hands of just about everyone, and as it should be. It's a very interesting, thought-provoking book.
It's a be nice manual.
Be nice. Play nice in the sandbox.
Good.
I mean, if I believe, and Howard and I have had this conversation many times, and I'm pretty sure everyone, I would like to think, would agree with me on this. I won't make any assumptions, because we all know what that means. But if we all just followed what we learned in kindergarten, which was just play nice.
Well, you bring up a really good point, because
Play nice in the sandbox.
Let's go to that sandbox.
Right.
Because when I deal with a lot of adult children, not of alcoholics, just adult children
Right.
who are in conflict. Often it's about money or it's about power. And when they fight, they all become 5 years old.
Absolutely.
And they're all acting like little babies.
Yeah.
And
Especially about if it's, in a divorce, it becomes about this is mine, I want that chair or the couch or set of wine glasses that they never drank out of. But and also, be the human being that your dog believes that you are.
Yeah, and I think, this is one of the issues is that, again, we've talked about, in the marriage book, we've talked about healing a broken heart. When we're in pain, when we're hurting inside, oftentimes we'll hurt someone else.
Absolutely.
Instead of saying, I can say, I'm angry with you.
Right.
And what does that do? It makes you defensive.
Right.
If I say to you, I'm hurting, I'm feeling low, that lets you in.
Yes.
Then you can say, what's going on? Let's
Beautiful.
talk about it. And we all need to communicate better. And what that means is to listen better.
Yes.
And to also make sure that you're basing your information on the best facts you have. It's called critical thinking. Don't simply take a rumor that may have come from an adversary, may have come from far away, and embellish that rumor and claim that it's true just because it supports a conspiracy theory or a fanciful thought. We need to think for ourselves, and we need to verify, we need to learn how to verify that what we're saying is true.
Right, absolutely. I think that once again, being a free thinker and being your own leader and not a follower is so important. And as we oftentimes follow our own voice, being true to that intuitive voice that's inside of you, I personally believe is crucial to your spirit. And I know that you and I have talked about the spirit, and I personally believe that your spirit is, what drives you if you allow it. Like, your spirit is that voice, that sense of hope that we all have, that things are going to be all right, that everything is going to work out in the end. And if you are teetering on, on the precipice of loss, on the cliff of loss, of losing that hope, of losing your spirit, then that's the time to, really dig deep and reach out.
I think sometimes it's important to get clarity. And part of the clarity is a challenge to anybody watching this, which is, who are you? Who are you really? What are your talents? What are your gifts? What are the things you truly wanted to do, but you said, oh no, it'll never work, it'll never happen, but it's part of you. Now, I was a severe dyslexic as a child. I mean, still to this day, if I'm writing characters like the capital letter N, I have to say peak first to write it. So I was never expected to read.
And then become a writer.
Never expected to write.
And write 7 books.
So we need
Plus.
to be, actually 16.
Shut up.
But we need to be a contradiction sometimes and take a chance. I mean, even just our meeting and having our discussion, we've had to reach beyond ourselves. We've had to reach beyond ourselves. And when you do, when you're willing to take a risk, you have a chance to find out who you really are and what your capabilities are. And true joy comes from what we give to others. We get our deepest joy from the love at all levels that we can give to someone else. we are designed for joy. We're designed to feel joy. We're designed to, at every level. And we feel a great sense of joy when we're able, to reach out and connect with people. Now, I have a book, one of my other books. This is a good segue into my book, Stumble Theory, The 13 Laws of Stumble.
Right.
Our lives are comprised by a series of stumbles, like these logs if we weren't watching where we were going.
Exactly.
How we fall. And we fall. And when you fall, you look around and you say, okay, here's this environment. What can I learn? How can I learn not to stumble this way again? Some of the greatest lessons in our lives happen from some of the mistakes we make.
Absolutely.
But it's only effective if we learn from those mistakes.
Right.
If we don't,
we're repeating history. We're bound to repeat history.
And we are history.
And we become history as well. And hence we never learn from the mistakes, and then we continue to repeat them, be it in a relationship or in work, professional or personal life. Absolutely.
So, we learn up to the moment we die. I'll tell you a cute story about my kid sister, Becky, who I absolutely adore. My mother was she lived to 91, lovely person, and she was having her last meal.
She was a sweet tooth, wasn't she?
Oh boy, was she ever.
Yeah.
In fact, her last meal was
Right.
her homemade brownies and chocolate chip cookies that my second oldest daughter, Rachel, made for her. And she's eating them, and she looks at Becky, my sister, and she's kind of fading, and she says to Becky, I love you. And then she kind of fades off a little bit.
Oh, that's
and I'm there
beautiful.
too, and I'm thinking to myself, I didn't say anything.
What about me?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, like 5 minutes later, her eyes open up again, and she goes, I love all of you.
Oh.
Now, that was really sweet.
Yeah.
And my point is, we keep learning, and we keep thinking and processing, right up to the end. So it's never too late to kind of regroup, take a look at our lives. In my writing,
Yep.
I argue for optimism. And I argue for people to say, look, you're not going to go backwards.
Right.
So let's go forward, and let's help you to look at yourself in a positive light and bring out the best in yourself. And sometimes I'll have people write to me, and I'll counsel them through writing, because you need to look at the ratio of optimistic versus pessimistic wording that people use, the ratio. And you'll find that people who use more negative words and more cynical words generally having a more cynical life. And one of the greatest sins we can commit is to be cynical.
Absolutely. And people are sometimes even, just the fact that you do that, you practice that particular avenue of therapy even is interesting, because some people are just even more comfortable journaling and writing. They're actually they seem to open up even more so writing their feelings down.
Well, composition.
Right.
When we compose, and you hear people say, compose yourself, you can write. And, like I said, when I'm writing a book, I sculpt these paragraphs. I'll sit there and I'll refine it until the words move me, not just move my reader. Because if I'm asking someone to go through a 200-page book, I want to make sure that I'm being a courteous writer. And I hear that a lot, that people say they like the way I write. They enjoy reading it. Like when you hear a musician, from my time, James Taylor, or Joni Mitchell, or Judy Collins, you listen to the words,
the lyrics,
because the music's so beautiful. There are certain elements that happen and experiences that happen that are in our DNA. For example, music is in our DNA. You can replay a song in your head that you love, from 20, 40, 50 years ago.
Right.
Look at kids with nursery rhymes. So,
and all of a sudden you're back there again to where you were when you first heard that song, or the memories that replay in your mind when that song is played again.
In a good way.
In a good way, yeah, absolutely.
Because, there are also negative things that happen, and there's real trauma that happens to people. And I've had, when I say what a week I've had, I mean, I have people in bereavement from, the COVID issue, which was not too long ago.
Right.
A dear friend who is, surviving an amputation, 2 pending suicides that I had to bring back. Somebody who lost a child. I mean, the list goes on and on. And you have to help people to understand, and I talk about this a lot in the book, Stumble Theory, that there are real traumas that happen to us. And people can argue, this was so traumatic, how can you expect me to recover? And the answer is because we all have a purpose. Now, a lot of times when people come to me because of my book, Early Winter, when I'm dealing with the loss of a loved one.
Right.
And they say, I can never get over the loss of my spouse or, my dear friend or whatever.
Parent,
and they spend the rest of their lives, planning to, stumble theory.
Oh, yes.
Planning to mourn. And I'm saying, wait a minute. If your wife could speak to you now, or your husband or your friend, what would they say to you? Would they say to you, I want you to punish yourself and mourn and be sad for me forever? Or would they say, go live your life?
Right.
Take me as a memory. The reality is I'm gone.
Yeah.
But use that and move ahead with your life. And moving ahead is what the other capstone book, Free Enterprise, is about. Free Enterprise is a very extensive book, but it says, my theme is heal and develop. And we're going to have Peter Lange, who's one of the best friends and one of the best co-authors you could ever hope for. And I'm going to let him, we're going to do a little cutaway, and he's going to talk about Free Enterprise. And he's going to talk about the purpose of that book.
Fantastic.
Because I always try to work with people who know how to do things better than I do. And he knows how to think, write, and develop ideas better than I do. And I'm proud to say that. We need to surround ourselves with people that set a high bar that we can reach for.
It's Peter Lange, that's Howard's talking about, and I'm here today in beautiful Austin, Texas, because I couldn't join Howard and Ann Marie up in the walk in the woods. But I wanted to say a few words about Free Enterprise. This is a book that has been decades in the making, and Howard and I have been working on it quite a long time. And the whole purpose of this book is to allow you to take an idea that you have in your head, maybe also for decades, and bring it out into the world, to bring the value and the gifts that you have to bring to the world through your idea. And what are we going to help you do? We're going to help you crystallize that idea into a real concept, whether it's a product or a service. Tell you how to market that specifically through dozens of techniques, how to do free advertising, how to build a prototype if it's a product that you're interested in for little to no money, and gather the resources together that you need to really make this thing real, bring it out in the world. So pick up a copy and check out our website, and we're willing to get on the phone with you and help you bring that idea to market, because as you'll see through this video, we believe that everybody has value to bring to the world, and we want to help you do that.
Now, Peter has really studied, the post-COVID marketing resurgence and what's happened to our economy, which will never be the same. I mean, if you think about the UPS and the FedEx trucks that come to our estate, every day.
Right.
2 times this winter they got stuck in the snow and we had to dig them out.
It's amazing.
But they're always there. And now, our whole system of commerce has changed. We've learned a couple of things. We've learned that we can do things remotely, but that kids need teachers in personal interaction. We've also learned that we can do a lot of work on our own. I call it reflect and relate. We can research, we can do work on our own, we can have remote officing to an extent, but then we've got to interact with people. Social media can be the most antisocial thing you can do. You think about the people who have joined cults and groups that alienate them from the rest of the world, and they believe religiously whatever they're told in that group, and then they start attacking everybody else. This is ages-old tribalism.
Isn't it ironic, though, how even the name social media, how it got its title, is actually ironic and somewhat ridiculous, because it's actually not social, in terms of, at least, it really makes you antisocial, because it kind of causes you to almost isolate yourself in a lot of ways.
That's exactly right.
Especially with our kids, with our, with teenagers and tweens. It literally, any of us who have children, or especially in specific teenagers, we can all relate to the fact that it is not uncommon for them to just spend countless hours at a time in their room, or on their, mobile devices, or laptops, desktops, whatever it might be.
We get lost within ourselves, and we can lose perspective when we say, okay, I'm not really all that busy, and we get seduced by social media when we need to be really taking a good look at ourselves sometimes and saying, am I being sufficiently contributive? Am I being sufficiently productive? You express that really, really well, and I think especially with our young people, they can get ideas, and we need to make sure that because of this technology, which really, this brainwashing that we're seeing now started really about 20, 25 years ago, and now it's become so galvanized. And with this generation, of our teens, we need to make sure, with my 13-year-old son, who's this handsome, striking kid, very smart, and he spends a fair amount of time connecting with his friends, because we did remote learning during the COVID plague. And we take the hike every single day. I
think that's a great way of still grounding, literally. And don't they have an actual term that is oftentimes used in many wellness and meditation facility clinics, alcoholism treatments, called grounding, where you literally take your shoes and socks off and you go barefoot and you put your feet on the bare ground or grass, and it's literally, that is the term, it's called grounding.
That's exactly right. And it pains me when...
Careful with your footing over here.
With my own children, I can listen to them, and I'm blessed to have 5 children who really have their heads screwed on right, and they really have a good perspective. But it's important as parents, as both parents, to make sure that you keep those lines of communication open and clear. A sweet dog.
She is a good girl.
Dogs. I always remember, the sweet times with my dogs all my life.
What was it like for you? What dog do you remember? Do you have the
My
most?
sheepdogs. I actually had 6 of them at different times.
Oh my gosh, I love those.
Succession.
I love that breed.
I think, to love animals is a measure of our civility as human beings. If you run into someone who, doesn't love animals, you have to question that.
Don't you think, Howard, that, animal, a dog specifically, they kind of know right away. Like, they can sense, like, if you're not a dog person, or, they can tell right away.
I think dogs teach us how to love.
Yeah.
I really do. I think dog is love. One of my 7 books actually is a re-release called Doggone. It's fairly well known. And it's poetry and it's somewhat esoteric, and it talks about the memory of a dog and what, how powerful that a dog is in our lives, or a cat or whatever.
Absolutely,
But it's a safe place to share our love and give a love, and our dogs understand that.
Absolutely.
They teach us so much about love.
We got him. I was fortunate and blessed enough to get him. Actually rescued him from a animal shelter. And I oftentimes think back that I didn't rescue him. He actually rescued me.
Well said.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I deal with, of course, I have my share of people when they lose a pet. Sometimes clients I haven't heard from in years will say, oh, my dog is really sick and I have to put her down, or, she's dying. And, one of the things I always remind people is when your dog has given everything they can and it's their time, they look at you and they say, I've given all I can give, and it's my time, and you need to let me go. It's a hard thing. On the other side of it, it's a blessing to have known, any of that love from people or pets. A lot of people, are so afraid of the hurt of losing that they never take the risk of loving.
So true.
And it's so important, that we say, okay, I'm going to, try to make better look at her.
Yeah.
Try to make better choices, in my life and in my loves. Use what I've learned and take a chance, because otherwise you're not really living. And, what I'm trying to encourage people through these books is to live fully.
I think one of the most beautiful things about a dog is that they are in a constant state of vulnerability.
Yeah.
They love you unconditionally.
Right. They always approve of no matter who you are.
No matter
You're having a bad day.
They don't care.
Still love you.
You can reprimand them.
Yeah.
And they will still love you.
Try that with a life partner.
Right. That's not going to work. But that's what I mean about them being in this continuous state of vulnerability, where they literally rely on you for everything, and they are always vulnerable. And that is really what love is to be vulnerable.
Right, and it's as long as you love me. And we often, in relationships, people will test that love and say, some people will test, we talk about childlike behavior, they'll test in a childish way. They'll be mean or nasty. And if you're still around, they'll say, oh, you must really love me because you're still here.
Right.
But we do need to set parameters of decent behavior. Look what we've learned over the past several years about greater respect for women.
Right.
And, the blessed Me Too movement and other things. These were so wonderful to happen because we all needed to men especially, needed to raise their consciousness about manners, about how they were treating women. And this is also what I'm trying to do in my book on racism, is to help people to raise their consciousness and say, wait a minute, I was making, terrible jokes about certain races, and I was doing, I now see that hurts people, that subjugates people, puts them under me, and that's not right. We need to start leveling the playing field. We need to start looking across and working together.
So, Howard, we talked a little bit about your book, Bye Bye Love, How to Mend a Broken Heart in 30 Days.
Sure.
So how do you what would you say, just curious, how do you know when you're in love?
You want to build a good a foundation of shared values. You want to make sure that you have sufficient issues in common, that there's enough safety and security, that you feel you have a viable means of communication with this person, that they don't have adjunct issues of temperament, what have you, or want you to repair them. And once you've gotten a sense that you can build a viable foundation, romance comes later. It doesn't come first, it comes last. Because if you build a solid foundation, then you have something to build romance on. And that to me is, the key, that so many people want love and they're afraid to love because they were hurt. And they were hurt because they didn't build that foundation.
In other words, you shouldn't fall in love. You should step into it wisely or consciously.
Here's a couple of thoughts. Because obviously,
Because we know that now. Because
learn by
we're a little
ouch.
smarter now.
And boy, the path to wisdom hurts.
Please don't trip into love.
Yeah.
It'll cost you a lot.
But if you stumble in love, you can look at stumble theory and
Right.
figure out what you learn. Here's the thing. That you hear so much these days about people doing that. Just saying, oh, I saw him and he was so charming and she was so beautiful. And these are such superficial issues. And women especially know this, that they go through all these efforts. And what I tell my daughters, and I always told my daughters, my grown daughters who are married, and and I also have a 14-year-old daughter, and they look to their father, for that kind of unbiased wisdom. And one of the key things I tell my youngest daughter is be careful of any guy who's overtly charming. Because, kindness and respect are one thing, but charm implies, gives you that feeling that they're after something. And
Charm is usually attached to handsiness. I like to say I prefer a man who is handy rather than
Hands-on.
handsy. Be handy, not handsy.
right, you can speak sweetly, but can you build a bathroom?
Right. Like, in other words, I take offense when guys say, do you know how to cook? Do you know how to build a house? That's what I like to say, right?
Yeah.
Hello, it goes both ways. Why are you asking me if I know how to cook?
Yeah.
Do you know how to build a bathroom?
I think that we are all designed for joy, as we talked about it. We're designed to learn. It's okay to make mistakes. And we're here to love and be loved. And we deserve to love and be loved. And you'll find that most of the issues people have with depression, yes, some is organic, is brain-fed, but you can still manage that to some degree. But most of the issues we have, with dependency and chemical dependency and eating disorders, are people who have not learned how to connect with their inner loving self and share it with another person. Look at the way countries are talking to each other. And, a lot of times, in diplomacy or supposed diplomacy, you hear this country taking a tough position and this country posturing, and all of a sudden you have all of these opposing parties, when really what we need to do is approach each other with humanistic kindness. Because in the most foreign, most remote country you can imagine, people, families in that country want to get along. They want to live freely. They want to get along with other people in the world. If you have, the fault is usually in leadership or lack thereof. And a leader, should not be promulgating fear. A leader should not be promoting fear, antagonism, distrust in one another. A leader should be promoting compassion and care for one another. And we really do need to reach out more effectively for those who need our help.
Sometimes I think that we get so hung up on getting our point across and making sure that we are heard and that we say everything that we have on our mind and that we know what we're saying and that we're being heard and the person gets it and is listening. But I often find that the real struggle for me personally has always been, are they actually comprehending what I'm saying? Even though they may say, I understand. I get it.
Have you ever noticed how many conversations, especially in relational conflict, where you'll make a point and then the other person will start talking and you might say, wait a minute, I was speaking.
Yeah.
And suddenly it deteriorates
Yes.
into, I was speaking and I need to finish even though we've finished. And it becomes that dynamic instead of the core, because people avoid the issues of really how can we deepen this relationship? How can we get along better? You know, it's funny, I was just thinking about what happened a few weeks ago, which best exemplifies my vision of harmony and hope for this world, humanity, is I was driving, it was a blazing, blinding snowstorm about 4 weeks ago up in Vermont, and you couldn't see it all in front of you, and suddenly, you know, I'm driving home in a steep hill and there's this big SUV that's off to the side and it's stuck, and there's 2 little kids in the car and the parents are frantic, they're not from Vermont, and so I had a tow line in my car, and you know, immediately I was able to, you know, get it all set up and get it out, help them.
Of course, you stopped because that's who you are,
that's
and
what you do
and that's what you do in Vermont.
That's what you do, and
Right.
you don't ask what their political leaning is.
course.
You don't care about their emotional state or whatever. We help each other. We help each other, and that's what we need to do. That's how we need to look at our neighbors. That's how we need to look at each other. That's what we need to do in relationships. Is, as you point out, we need to really listen to someone. And how do you listen? It's not just about the content of what you're saying. It's not just the words. It's your tone. It's your emotion. What is my partner or friend or associate or, you know, negotiating person, negotiating party trying to convey? And, you know, what am I hearing about their tone? What am I hearing about their words? What am I reading? What am I seeing? The key about relationship, the thing that makes a relationship fun, is when you can deepen it.
Right.
And there are certain relationships that you can't deepen, so people become overly charming. We talked about charm. They, you know, become overly amorous or overly accommodating.
Pleasing, yes.
But you're not getting, you know, you're not feeling it in your heart.
Right. That intellectual intimacy.
Right. The
Right.
foundation we talked
Right.
about. So, you know, what I'm looking at, and again, my 7 books represent a call for the world to come together, for the world to heal and help each other heal, help that stranger in trouble. You know, there are many countries that are really oppressed, and we worry about all the people coming in here, and I'm not trying to wax political, but we do need to reach out and share our best with people and help those that are oppressed, that are in need, instead of being caught in our little groups and our little clubs thinking we have all the answers, you know, because we're with this party or that party.
And oppressed can mean a lot of different things. We don't want anybody to get hung up on the word oppressed.
Right.
You know, just meaning in need.
Right.
In need.
Right. You know, it can mean in need. It can mean being treated unfairly,
Right.
being discriminated. We've covered, you know, harassment in the
Right.
workplace.
In
We've
need.
come far. We've done a lot. But we need to do a lot more to show that we care about each other and we reach out. And especially, you know, to those who feel really isolated or disenfranchised, we need to be more connected to each other, because we really are interdependent. And when someone, you know, gets negative, dangerous ideas or destructive ideas in their head, that happens so often in this country, and those ideas tend to fester and they close down the rational element of the brain, and we tend to do harm, you know, and those tend to promote harm. That's an issue. That's really a, you know, a big issue that we need to address. And it starts, you know, by looking at the ways that we can connect with one another, that we can harmonize, as you say. You know, the answer, not trying to be like too John Lennon-ish, saying that love is the answer, but John was right. You know, that what we need is love, and love heals. And, imagine a world where we really reached out to each other, and, the people that we were taught should be our enemies because they were from a certain country are not really our enemies. I have friends all over the world. I have friends that have never had connections or trust with people, of my background. And we've become not just good friends, we've become great friends. Because what I say is you take the weakest place in our society and you turn it into the strongest.
So Howard, I was looking at your free enterprise book. I was reading the free enterprise book, and it's extremely comprehensive. I mean, it goes into a lot of detail as to what you need to do, how you need to do it. And can you just maybe tell me a little bit about how would a person go about monetizing their talent?
Well, Free Enterprise is a pretty lengthy book, but it's just something that it's like a manual that they would constantly refer to. But this is something that has been a specialty of mine since my career began. When I was 30 years old and I was working with products and marketing products and working in product development and kind of got foisted into that, I looked at how people promoted concepts and products, studied it, and my goal was to see how could you develop an idea that was essential to who you were, if you were an artist or whatever it is that you were doing, and turn it into something profitable. Now this was 30 odd years ago.
Right, and that book was an enormous success.
Good idea. Now what?
Fantastic.
Good idea. Now what? Sold over 100,000 copies.
Wow.
I was absolutely astonished when Time Warner called on us, and they bought the rights to the book. And it was quite a time. It was quite an early peak. But what I did was I followed ideas on how you could develop an idea, put it together, build a prototype, promote it, and sell it all for free. Without having to spend $20,000 on a patent, what have you. And you know what? I was right, that there are ways to do this, and people do this. And to this day, in the spring, what I love about Vermont also is in the spring we have all these craft fairs,
Right.
where people have been working on their art or their unique ideas or their wood carvings, and then you get to see those wonderful ideas. And they're at the craft fair and they're selling what's essential to them. They're also selling in social media. And it's all the dream that I had and set the foundation for this industry over 30 years ago. So along comes Free Enterprise, which now is totally up to date. And of course, there's a huge segment on social media. As I've alluded to earlier, always find and surround yourself with people who know more than you do.
Absolutely.
Otherwise,
Don't be the smartest person in the room.
Right. Be the one who listens and
That's
talks
right.
last. That's
Absolutely.
the ideal. So
Surround yourself with unbelievable, incredible mentors.
set your bar high. Set, goals that you couldn't possibly reach. Now remember, this is coming from the dyslexic kid who was told by a psychiatrist when he was in second grade, you'll never be able to read, you'll never be able to write. So, you need to rebel against those things that make you a contradiction of what they say you can't do, if it's part of your heart.
Stop right there. I think that quote, that is a tweetable quote, that is an IG quote, that's a Facebook quote, that is just memorable. That's really something that we should spread. So in the book, Speak Up, one of the quotes that kind of just really speaks to me personally that I really like is self-assessment. Who are you? Are you as good as you think you are, or as bad as they say you are?
It's amazing how I think I went on to talk about how we can sometimes become our own jailer, our own, self-restrainer of our potential. We can hold ourselves back. And sometimes, I've had clients that held themselves back for years because they made mistakes or they made misjudgments or, they basically are free to now live their lives, but they're still kind of punishing themselves. They never forgave themselves. And it's really important. I mean, yes, there are some, abhorrent things that people can commit or do that, are arguably unforgivable. But for most of us, especially the people who are the kindest and most sensitive, most feeling, they tend, to sometimes have a very negatively distorted view of themselves. And they need to let go of that. And that's part of standing up to bullying and standing up to gossip. Because gossip is, one of the basic elements of racism and bullying.
Absolutely. And you do have a chapter, obviously, on that in here, and on adult temper tantrums, which is
big one.
Huge. And we certainly know people who
grown-ups who suddenly tap into their 5-year-old inner child that they should have vanquished years ago or come to terms with, either having temper tantrums that are internal or inverted or overt, and will attack people, and you feel the hurt that they're feeling. You feel it here, which is where they're feeling it as well in their gut. So basically, what I'm trying to help people to do in awakening consciousness is to inspire people to grow up at your age, start to make good, balanced, mature choices. Don't make choices, don't be reactive to things that people say. Be responsive in the highest integrity fashion possible.
Right. Absolutely. What would be your greatest message from Speak Up, from this book?
It's interesting, as a father and as a mother, sometimes when we see untoward behavior in our children, and children are the true test of our authenticity, sometimes I find myself saying, this has to stop. This must stop. This behavior is inappropriate. And what we've been through, especially the past few years, of people labeling each other, of people making biased, unfounded, unqualified statements or assessments based on mistruth or attacking each other, it needs to stop. We have regressed, and we cannot evolve as a people, as a society, as a country, if we continue to live in this gossip and racism mentality. We devolve when we are inappropriate with one another.
Right. It breaks the spirit.
Breaks the spirit and sets us backwards.
Absolutely.
We've gone backwards. We've traveled backwards the last few years. For what? Following leaders that were leading us astray, or were only in it for the money, and basically what they thought were campaigns, what their followers thought were actually infomercials to raise money. That's all they were.
Free enterprise, real systems for creating peace through a global commerce. And this is co-authored by Peter Lange as well.
Well, the genius Peter Lange. He's very humble, very modest, but he's so brilliant. And the most brilliant thing about Peter is he explains everything in a gracious and patient way. Even if we should get it the first time, he is always able to explain things in a way and he makes sure that you understand it. And that's had such a profound effect on my writing, on every single page. The interesting thing about this book, it has nearly 100 systems for developing a business, for promoting it, marketing it, and most of those systems are free of charge. They cost nothing or next to nothing. And the idea is to put the promise and the dream of enterprise into the hands of the poorest family in the poorest part of the world. Because even in the worst, most oppressed part of the world, of the planet, there's access to social media. And I show people in most elementary terms how they can access that and sell, whatever the wares are that they're selling. It's using social media for the good. A lot of forces are using it for evil and propaganda and lies, and to stir up antagonism, between enemy countries. But we can use it for the good, because when people trade, they make peace. If you've ever been to a flea market or an outdoor craft fair,
Right.
and you're looking at things, you make friends with the vendors. And that's the same internationally, that, as you're trading with people, you have opportunities to make friends and build lots of bridges. So that's the aim of this book.
I really loved the cohesiveness of this book. I mean, the whole idea and the concept, the way it was a concept guide of how to get your idea to fruition.
Right. Everyone who has a business, from small to medium, should have this book, because it has ways to, if you think you understand how to do basic PR, you don't. This has not only, 11 ways to do that. After each description of each methodology, there's something called a supercharger, and we show you little things that have never been seen before, to really get that extra boost of marketing. And I have countless clients and businesses that use these techniques, because I test everything. I tested these techniques for years, and have gone from paying exorbitant amounts, with all due respect to conventional radio, to celestial radio. The guy paying $5,000 a week for his radio advertising, he now pays zero. He does public service announcements for charity events, and the rest of the work he does is through advertising, is through social media, and he's making more of a profit than he was before. So it's how to focus your media and how to find out what's accessible generally without spending a lot of money or without spending money at all.
What would be your greatest piece of advice from this book to a brand new person, a person who is brand new to the business world, wants to hit the ground running, to start their business? They have this phenomenal idea, they have a little trepidation about what to do. What would be the biggest and most important piece of advice that you could give someone, other than go and get this book and do what you're supposed to do, page by page? What would you say?
I think I'm going to quote you. I think you said something to the effect, the more you believe in your dream, the more your dream will believe in you.
Right.
And I think that's really, it shows that you've read through much of the book, and it really is true that you need to have the dream in your bloodstream. You need to really believe and have a sense that this is what I was born to do. And then you give it everything you can. You communicate, because that's what marketing is. It's communication. You communicate, you believe in it. I mean, look, I've got 7 books out this year. That's insane. I've been told it's never been done before, but I'm sure that someone has. But I believe in the message of each book. I believe really strongly that, we need to help heal this world. We need to help heal ailing couples. We need to help heal broken hearts. We need to help people get up again after a year of horror and unnecessary death of hundreds of thousands of human beings. So that's why these books are out now. It's to help herald in, we've been through the terrible time, this is to herald in a time of healing and a new personal prosperity.
I think that if you don't get anything out of this particular free enterprise book, then
You can't read.
you can't read. And you have a whole other problem.
Yes. And I haven't written a book about that. Because who'd
Stay
read it?
tuned, we might get another book out of this. Right, we'll get an audio book. We have literally doggone early winter. How to make an impossible marriage possible. The 13 laws of stumble. Bye bye love, hello, happiness. That one's coming out too. And Speak Up. Incredibly interesting book from Free Enterprise. I am incredibly humbled to call you my friend. This is by no means a small feat. To write even just one book is certainly quite an accomplishment. And I myself have learned that to touch and make a difference in just one person's life in one day is like a ripple. You know, it goes on to touch others. It's a ripple effect. And I believe that this collection does just that and so much more. And I really feel like I want you to know that you should be incredibly proud of yourself and do your own self-assessment for that. Because this is really amazing to have this kind of talent, and you should be incredibly proud of yourself.
Well, you've been very gracious. I did, put my heart into every word of these million words. I'll tell you a quick story that best exemplifies how I feel, and I am deeply grateful for your time today. And for all people out there who took the time to listen to this show. About 6-7 years ago, actually right after the marathon bombing, about 5 or 6 weeks afterwards, I was at Spalding Hospital because my children, my 2 oldest children, had worked there. Wonderful rehab place, just amazing. And they were having their annual festival day in late spring, and I was standing there, and a car pulls up, and it's Thomas Menino, the former mayor of Boston, who I thought handled himself amazingly well. I mean, you see the real character of people in crisis.
Absolutely.
And so I had a chance. He was waiting for his people to come, and I had a chance to sit with him and have a conversation with him. He was very gracious and kind, and I'll never forget what he said. I said, look, above all, I just want to shake your hand and tell you, how much I valued your heartfelt support and insight and reassurance to all of the world, during this terrible time in American history, when the bombing happened. And you know what he said to me? He just goes, kid, I was just doing my job. Just like that.
Right.
And you know what? With this, I'm just being me. I'm just doing my job. I know the books are good. I know they're well reviewed, and I'm humbled by that, and I'm humbled by your gracious, kind, and loving words. I'm just trying to serve my readers.
I hope that everybody will take a moment to, look into these books and maybe, take some time to decide which one appeals to you the most and speaks to you the most and serves you the most.
Oh, we should also mention the publisher is Waldorf Publishing. You can go to waldorfpublishing.com.
And you'll find the link at the bottom.
You'll see it. Yeah, you see the link there. And also our website, which is freeenterprisesolutions.com.
And that link will be found at the bottom at the end of this as well. And I just wanted to thank you so much for allowing me into your world and for also sharing your gift with me, your talent and your gift. And I hope that others will find your gifts of authenticity as real as I have.
Well, thank you, dear.
Thanks, Howard.
Mm.
Thank you. I love you, my friend.
You too.
God bless. Blessings. Blessings to you all, too. We hope you enjoyed this time with us. And we certainly hope that you will grab one of these books, the one that you like, that seems to speak to you the most, and follow us again, join us again on Conversations and Coffee, Cappuccino,
And a nice hike.
Hikes, and Cookies. Blessings.